Okay, taking a little bit of time with my voice because I'm also taking a little bit of time with my creativity, and it's really nice, so I wanted to share it. In previous videos, I have showed you two parts of my process that are absolutely crucial. Nothing would happen without them. One is the chaos document. So that's where I just put every thought I have about the comic into one place, and it's very disorganized at first, but then it grows and grows to the point that I can start to see, okay, these things belong together, they're a similar type of thing. Maybe I'll group stuff based on the chapter it should happen in, or I'll group things based on the imagery. Sometimes it's like similar metaphors or formal choices, things that have to do with like actually how I'm going to draw the comic or maybe even how it'll be printed. So this document gets organized at some point, and then once I have like chapter breakdowns in that document, I can start to work on a zero draft. So we did zero draft July last year. We're going to do it again this year. That's just a time where we support one another. Sorry for the dog barking. Where we support one another to make zero drafts of our projects that we haven't finished yet. And a zero draft is just beginning to end the sloppiest, quickest version of your project. Hey, bug! I don't know if that'll work. Anyway, sloppiest, quickest version of your project, because having it done beginning to end does something. It really, really helps to clarify that you are capable of doing the thing, and also your good taste kicks in. You see a sloppy version of the thing that you want to make really good, and you're like, oh, it shouldn't look like that. This should change. I should move this around. Maybe that should go to the end of the project. So when it's there, it's not as much work. At least that's how I find it to be. So I do a zero draft in the form of thumbnails, which I can show you again. It's just each of these is a single page of the book, and then when you see two pages linked together like this, that's the middle of the book, the gutter, and this is what's called a spread. So it's like you're looking at the book like this, 1 page, 2 page spread. So that's what I do for my zero drafts, and I'm pretty sure I have a whole video about that too. I'll put them in the video description so you can find them easily. But then there's this other thing, this third step, that is something I just invented last February during my writing for comics class, because I think I was sort of mentally doing this before, but then I had to explain it and it became an actual process, an actual practice. So if you're curious about it in more detail, you can look at the writing for comics videos from February of 2023. And those are available if you subscribe on my website. You're welcome to subscribe, watch the video, and then unsubscribe. It, doesn't matter to me. I just want you to have access to the things that you want, and that's the way to do it right now. So the process that I created was to actually put every moment of the story, like every panel, once you figured out what they're going to be with a zero draft, just line them up in a row on a piece of paper. If you want, you can make a little note of like what's happening in each panel, but personally I find just having them in a row and like marking the moments that kind of stand out helps me to see the general picture of things without detail in each panel. And then what you do is underneath that, just draw a line that's essentially going to look like a graph, and it's going to show the emotional intensity, or just intensity, but I think they're the same, the emotional intensity of the story, just drawn in terms of like peaks and valleys. So if the story starts out like very, very low energy, I would do like a very flat line. And then as it starts to grow, like raise it up. And then if there's a spike, great. And if there's like a crash of like, oh my God, so much was happening and now we've just landed in like, ugh, nothing, then that would be a big low. So it's just a little graph and it's loose. There's no like science to it. It's just a really, really simple thing. But that is how I can visually represent the reader's emotional experience. Because ideally, when a reader is taking in a story, they're identifying with the story, they're being carried along emotionally by the story. So you should be able to help them feel what you want them to feel and what the characters are feeling. And when you know what the characters are supposed to be feeling, then you can also see, okay, what's the reader's experience going to be? Like, did I put a bunch of intense things in a row together? Did I not have intensity for a really long stretch and they're probably going to get bored and fall asleep in the middle here? Like, that really helps just to sort of track the movement and the rhythm and the dynamics of the story. So what I'm doing now is I've got a few chapters zero drafted, so I actually can see visually like how I wanted things to go, and I could choose like the way I'm telling each part of the story and decide to make it feel the way that I want it to feel. So like for the section where my character is like doing yoga, I'm like, that should feel really spacious and like bodily and hopefully calming. But then for the part where she's in a lot of pain, I might like come in closer to her, show a lot of sort of feeling lines or something, like a lot of tight facial expressions. I get to make those choices for intensity. Like it's both closeness and distance, as well as, you know, spaciousness or the line style that I use. There are so many different ways that you can tell the audience this is intense. And there's other ways that you can tell the audience this is not. This is like very open. This is very receptive time. So I'm going through the zero drafts that I did, and I've got this piece of paper where I've just divided it and written out like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. And I'm also putting in, just in point form, what happens in the chapter, like the most important things that happen in the chapter, but all the things really. So in this one, my chapter 1 says, you know, introduce Nell's daily life and community, and introduce Shiv's daily life and community. There's these two main characters that I'm working with. I want to introduce the land, because the land is not only the like physical location of the story, but it's very much like a participant. The land to me is like a character in the story. And I need to introduce the first scares of each character, but not explain them. I want to introduce them, but not explain where they come from. They're just going to be moments of fear. So what I've done is I looked through all of that. I put the point form version of it here. And then just at the bottom for myself, I drew a little line graph. It's like I said, not a science. I'm just like, okay, so in Nell's story, the way that I zero drafted it, like what I actually did, it's like a pretty sort of low key dynamic for most of it. She's kind of like waking up and taking her dog for a walk and like, you know, has a meal and comes back home. And then while she's doing yoga, has a spike of pain. So that's what this huge spike at the end is. While she's doing yoga, she has this huge spike of pain and then crashes down and just goes to the couch, and basically we see just like a time lapse where it's like she then spends the rest of the day on the couch. But it's literally just one page of like, oh, and now her life is just this. It's just couch time now. So her story is pretty chill. Big spike, and then a crash, and then nothing. For me, those two lines mean the end, because I have a music background, so the end of a piece of written music will have two lines to indicate this is the stop. So then I wrote Shiv's narrative, and these are actually going to be back to back in the story, so I have to look at them as like one happens and then we go to the other. And in Shiv's narrative, it should actually be that there's a little bit more variation. But what I did here is I was like, well, she's kind of going through her life, and then she has a big scare, something that scares her very badly, and then she gets into like kind of a dark place about it, but then she comes up out of the dark place, and that's the end of her narrative in the chapter, in the most basic of terms. But here's the thing. Looking at that, I'm like, that's so boring. Like, I don't want to have both characters introduced in exactly the same energetic way, in exactly the same, like, going along, ooh, big spike, and then down. I'm like, if I'm going to do that, I want to do it on purpose. And for this, I don't have any need of doing that. It doesn't suit the story. It doesn't suit my style of storytelling. So seeing that in this little squiggle graph, I'm like, okay, something needs to change. And then I think about what needs to change. So with Nell, I actually think that's a very appropriate story graph for her, because she is specifically deliberately living her life in a way that is very quiet and calm, trying to heal her body and deal with her nervous system and help her body with the pain that it expresses. But the pain interjects. The pain is like calm, fucked up. Like, oh, everything's fine. And then, woo, it's like shattering, and then she crashes, and then she just has to, you know, stay put until the pain releases, and then she goes back to trying to live very calmly, very quietly, just like very sustainably. Then there's Shiv. Shiv is not doing that. Shiv lives a very active life, so she's like, you know, she wakes up in the morning from the anxiety of an alarm clock. There's one spike. She needs to get out of bed and rush to where she's going because she definitely hit snooze a few times and now is stressed about getting there. That's also pretty high intensity. Then she like bikes through St. John's. That's high intensity because it's up and down hills, but also cars and bicycles mix badly here. Mostly cars do a bad job of making space for bicycles and making the roads safe for bicycles. But she's like a punk activist, and so she's going to do the thing and, you know, enjoy the risk. So she's already living with way more dynamics in her day to day. And then she gets to her job. She does her job. She like leaves her job to go meet friends. What else does she do? I'm just going to look in here again. Oh, yeah. And then she has her own kind of fears, the ways in which that she's haunted. She's also living with that. So moments that seem innocuous to someone else or to someone looking at her are actually moments where she's like battling something inside or having to like quickly assess how safe she is, because she's also trans, remember, and trans people are generally actually not safe in the world in the way that many of us are. That's a super broad statement, but I can absolutely talk more about that in another video if it feels like something that you want explained. But literally, like, you know, interaction to interaction, there is that question often of like, am I good? Are we good? Are you good? How against my existence is the person I'm talking to, especially when it's a stranger at like a coffee shop or someone you're passing in your work life or whatever. Like, those questions are ever present for at least a lot of the trans people that I know. And if they're not, then I'm very happy for that, because I would hope that someday soon we don't have to, I said we, but I mean they don't have to live this way. Anyway, I could really get lost in that. The point is, Shiv's lived experience is way more spiky. So I need to put that in. I haven't put that in yet, and I can see that with this little wiggle graph. So I'm going to go ahead and rearrange the first chapter to make sure that that is felt and real when people are reading about Shiv's experience. And once I've rearranged that, then I'm going to go back and see if that changed any of my following chapters, like if I borrowed from them, and then I need to, you know, patch it up and make it work. And I'm going to do this for every chapter. I have 8 chapters written out on this page, but I've got 13 planned. So I'm going to do the same thing where I put my bullet points in and then I do the little wiggle graph, and then I'll know like what is the flow of this story and is it building the way I want? Is there enough space for people to breathe? Is there enough fear that you really feel it, but also enough space between the fear that you feel the jolt when it comes back? And you know, fear means nothing without hope. Like, it literally becomes meaningless. So there has to be beauty, there has to be connection, it has to be wonderful, because that's what they have to lose. So that's what I'm going to say for today. This has already been 13 minutes, and now I got to go rest my voice and probably not speak again until tomorrow. But I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did, and I'm going to keep enjoying it while I keep working on this today.